So welcome everyone to our Thursday evening class. And as I hear that we're all familiar faces today, at least to a certain extent, we will start with our meditation, which today will be about 45 minutes long. And after that we'll move on to a subject matter for our right livelihood. Yes. So if you'd like to start by closing your eyes very gently, finding a comfortable position for yourself. And realigning our mind with the place that feels most comfortable for us at the center of ourselves. Some of us might like to sit cross-legged for meditation, in which case we'd sit with our right leg over our left leg, our right hand on our left hand, the index finger of our right hand touching against the thumb of our left hand, with our hands turned palm upwards in our lap. If we're sitting on a chair, then we try to sit with our back relatively straight. Again, with our hands resting palm upwards in our lap. And the way we close our eyes is as if we are almost half closing them. Closing our eyes in much the same way that we might close our eyes to go to sleep. So we never squeeze our eyes closed, and we make sure that there's no pressure around our eyes. And we take special care by scanning down through our body to be sure that each and every muscle inside us is as relaxed as possible. Starting at the top of our head and scanning down, allowing a tide of relaxation to release any tension in the muscles of our body as we scan down through our face, our jaw, both shoulders, relaxing both of our arms, forearms, and then our hands and fingers. Continuing on down, we relax all the muscles of our torso, chest, trunk and abdomen, both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. And if there are still knots of tension remaining anywhere in our body, then we do our best to relax them as far as possible. Allowing our body to feel as if it is light in weight, almost as if it is dissolving into the atmosphere around us, so that we can turn our attention instead to relaxing our state of mind, which for practical purposes we can envisage as being the feeling inside us, that sense of warmth and well-being, inner space. Something that we also need to let go of any mental tensions, any of the clutter still remaining in our mind. Any unwanted thoughts from the past or plans for the future. And to put ourselves in an appropriate state of mind for the meditation ahead, we might try conjuring up a sense of happiness and joy in the mind. It seems to completely fill every last molecule of our being. Leaving no space in the mind for any other sort of thought. When we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently and using no effort at all, we might imagine that inside our body is just an empty space, like a hollow cavity, or as if our whole body has been transformed into a sort of transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. Within this empty space of our body and mind, in order to act as an anchor for our attention, we might conjure up a picture such as a bright shining sun, a full moon, a star, perhaps a crystal ball, as if that object seems to appear inside the space of our body. If you don't feel the need for something to anchor the mind, you can just generally become aware of the space within yourself without visualizing anything. Just cultivating a sense of mindfulness and self-possession at the center of oneself. Balancing our sense of being relaxed, but also alert within ourselves the whole of the time. We find our mind wandering off onto other things around us, perhaps distractions. Each time we realize within us as before. If the inner object disappears, we can conjure up a new one. And we should bear in mind that sometimes we tend to feel the object more than actually seeing it. If the inner object changes at all, we just allow it to do that. There's no need for us to change it back. And we can allow our practice to become one of observation, simply observing without interfering, as the inner object continues to transform on its own. And the way we observe as a meditator is to maintain a light but continuous contact between our awareness and what is going on in our mind. Observing without allowing any thoughts to arise in the mind, without any questions. Once the mind starts to settle more and more, we'll notice that from a first object in the mind, there's a sense of expansion and opening up at the center, which allows the inner object to expand outwards in size, expanding beyond ourselves, until the object seems to become so large in size that it extends over the horizon, at which point a new object will come up in its place, often brighter and clearer than the last. Often within our tradition they are described in terms of inner spheres. Sometimes they can even come in the form of inner bodies, such as the astral body and many more in that sequence. Within our tradition, the great abbot of Wat Pak Nam, the originator of the tradition, talked about sets of inner spheres, which are like inner dimensions of our own life, our own human condition, but on a subtler level within ourselves. For those who are really adept in meditation, it's possible to study and learn from the inner life, the feelings, the mind, the truth of each of these inner bodies and spheres, to explore ourselves on many levels, many dimensions. And the deeper we go, then the more subtle these inner states become, the closer they approximate to the truth, the more accurately they align themselves with the real nature of life and the world. To the point that we can actually start to break free of the inner taints, poisons, shortcomings, blind spots in our mind. So for now we try to strike a balance and poise for ourselves in meditation, a sort of sweet spot for the mind, or entering upon the zone of our meditation, something which we could refer to as the thought still, allowing us to delve deeper beyond the superficial thoughts in the mind. In the meantime, we generate a sense of positivity in the mind, something that arises spontaneously whenever our mind becomes quieter, more free from thought. So we cultivate our mind in this way, lightly and gently, each to our own practice in silence for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. Keep our mind on track at the center of our body the whole of the time. Lightly, gently, always remaining at the center of the inner experience we've built up for ourselves so far in the meditation. Whether it be something we see or something we feel inside us. If our attention wanders off onto other things, each time we realize, we just bring it back again to the center of the body as before. Whether it's 100 times or 1,000 times that we have to do that. Little by little, building up a sense of familiarity with this point at the center of ourselves. If thoughts arise in the mind, we do our best to ignore them, only making use of the mantra Samma Arahang. If the thoughts are too many, simply to ignore. Little by little, our mind will align itself with a deeper sense of self within us. Wanting to learn about ourselves, starting to appreciate ourselves on a deeper level. Those who might not understand the real purpose of meditation might think that it's nothing more than navel-gazing. Or encouraging our own sense of ego, or even a form of narcissism. But once we start to find that the mind can go deeper, to appreciate the deeper layers of ourselves, then we start to see that meditation is a way to find out who we really are, in order to go beyond our own shortcomings. And there's a story from the time of the Buddha about a group of 30 princes who were amusing themselves by playing hide and seek in a forest glade. And those princes had all paired themselves off with princesses, and only one of the princes, who was the odd one out, who had no princess to pair off with, had brought along a courtesan. And as they were playing hide and seek in the forest, they left their jewels for safekeeping with the courtesan while they enjoyed themselves. While the princes and princesses were busy looking for each other in the forest, the courtesan realized that if she ran off with the jewels, she might never have to work another day in her life. So thinking this, she disappeared very quickly from the scene, and it was only at the end of the princes and princesses' game that they noticed her absence. So at this point the princes were not so pleased about losing their jewels, and this time the game of hide and seek became much more serious in its stakes. And in the course of their hunt for the courtesan, they came across the Buddha sitting for meditation in the forest. And when the Buddha saw the princes, he asked them a very profound question. Would you be better off looking for that courtesan, or would you be better looking for yourself? Do you really want to look for that woman, or would you be better off looking deeper inside yourself? Because the Buddha knew that those princes hardly knew themselves at all. All they knew was their superficial self, their importance, their riches, their entitlement. But they didn't know what lay deeper than that inside themselves. And because those princes had latent wisdom within themselves, this question triggered them to look deeper, triggered them to look beyond their physical self, deeper into the mind. And very soon the Buddha had those princes meditating until all of them were able to attain their true selves inside. A body of enlightenment inside each of them, which they never knew they had before. So actually by looking deeper into ourselves, we can release ourselves from a superficial self. We can release the mind to go deeper towards the real, true self, which is something that we share with all humanity in the world. It is of a nature of wisdom and compassion and purity inside ourselves, all the qualities arising from enlightenment. So we continue to keep our mind at the trailhead of this peace, this pathway towards the true inner self, by maintaining our mind with lightness and gentleness at the center of ourself, until we can touch upon a sense of lightness, expansion within ourselves that will allow the mind to go deeper. We continue to cultivate our mind in this way, lightly and gently, for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to time for some loving-kindness meditation. Keep our mind on track at the center of our body the whole of the time. Always at the center of whatever inner experience we've built up for ourselves as a result of the meditation so far today. For some of us, the inner experience may take the form of some sort of inner illumination, in which case we can place our attention very gently at the center of that brightness, so gently that it expands outwards from that central point, all on its own. For others it may be more of a feeling like that of well-being. Again, if we touch gently at the center of the feeling, then the feeling will expand outwards, spreading throughout our whole body. For others it may be more like inner imagery, objects in the mind, large or small. We place our mind at the center of the object, then the objects will also expand in size. Almost as if we were focusing in on them with a magnifying glass. And in this way we allow the inner experience to become larger in size by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness. Allowing that inner experience to extend throughout our body first of all, with the affirmation that may I be well and happy, may I be free from all suffering. Allowing those words of compassion to reach into the very fiber of our being, to every cell of our body. And then we allow the loving kindness to extend outwards beyond ourselves, like an aura or a halo, extending around our body into our surroundings, in all directions all around. And however far it extends, to every living being it reaches, it does so with the same affirmation that may all those living beings also be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. We extend our loving kindness in this way, initially outwards into the whole of the room in which we are sitting for meditation, all the living beings therein, all sentient beings, those we can see, those we cannot see. We extend loving kindness to them all without exception. Wider still to the whole building, outwards to the whole neighborhood, almost as if we were extending our loving kindness across a map seen in bird's eye view, extending further outwards to the whole municipality, town and county, to neighboring counties, in all directions all around, to the whole country, to all living beings in neighboring countries, across the entire continent, and eventually to all the continents of the world. To the point that our loving kindness extends across the whole of the face of this planet. bringing compassion, loving kindness to all beings, whether on the land, in the air, or in the sea, touched by our loving kindness, with the pure intention that all these living beings be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Let world peace become a reality within our own lifetimes. And we can extend loving kindness in all these 6 great directions, to the front and to the back, right and left, above and below, almost like beams of loving kindness extending outwards, limitlessly into the universe, taking in all living beings wherever they are to be found, without exception. Over the last few moments of our meditation, we might also extend loving kindness to particular loved ones, toward whom we'd like to extend that sense of compassion, loving kindness, freedom from suffering, toward those for whom we feel a particular debt of gratitude, for those still living, and even for those who have already passed, trusting that the purity of our intention and good wishes can extend across the gulfs of space and time to reach those loved ones wherever they are to be found. So we extend our loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our practice until we come to the appropriate time. Be Buddha Balapata Pajekananjaya Balang Arahantananjate Jena Arakam Pantami Sabaso Sabaputtanupavena Sapatammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Satasoti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. You look like you're good for a whole hour, I would have thought. Maybe future project for our temple. So I gently continue with the subject matter for today, which brings us to number 18 in our series on enlightened living. I've been gradually working my way through a series of topics derived from Buddhism, which are like values or virtues, practices, which are in a sort of sequence, running from those which are fairly mundane and workaday, and working towards those which are more transcendental and esoteric. And the idea is that no matter where you jump in on the staircase, that the next step you take will be one step further upwards. So in fact, even though you may feel that you're coming in like halfway through, because there are a total of 38 in all, in fact, you can start anywhere and it will lead you forward and upwards. And the place where we are right now in the 38 blessings is we're looking at how to become a pillar of society. And to get to this point in the blessings, and we have done quite a lot of groundwork already, especially being able to stand on our own 2 feet financially, having our family in a harmonious state, and now we're seeing what we can do for society around us to give something back. And the ones that we've looked at most recently have involved things like generosity, being able to practice purely, which is a sort of way of saying to do what is right or just in society, having a sense of justice. Last time we started to look at how to deal appropriately or helpfully with our extended family, and today we make a start on blameless work, which, to put it another way, in its Buddhist context, you may be familiar with from the idea of right livelihood. In fact, the workplace has been something that we have talked about a few times already in our little sequence of the 38 blessings. If you go back to number 14, then we learned about just sort of getting the work done in the first place, and not interested at all in the quality of the work, but simply just sort of getting a job, basically. And the reason for that, back in that particular section of the 38 blessings, was basically to support our close family. Later on, we became a little bit more nuanced in our treatment of the workplace, not just getting the work done, but actually valuing the craftsmanship put into the work as a sort of way of developing our own sense of dignity and self-worth. And later on, working not only for ourselves, but also thinking about the benefits that our work brings to a wider society as well. So not just getting the work done, not just doing it with a sense of craftsmanship, but also doing it in a way that is beneficial to others in society, or at least not making a profit at the expense of others. So when we're talking about blameless work or right livelihood, then we're mostly dealing with the ethical context of physical work, but work generally in the Indian vocabulary means any sort of tasks that we do, whether it be the things we say or the things we do with our mind as well. So you could say that meditation is even a form of mental work, if you like to put it that way. So today we get to look mostly at the sort of economic aspect of the work we do, and as for the right livelihood part, then I'll deal with that next time I see you. Okay, so in small doses. Being blameless in terms of human dignity and on the level of society as a whole, then we cannot escape the idea of economics. And the word Buddhist economics isn't a sort of native term to Buddhism, but it's actually coined by the economist E.F. Schumacher back in his 1973 book called Small is Beautiful. And his idea was that of there being a sort of economics as if people mattered, not just economics to sort of please the stockbroker, or economics to sort of get the economy back on track, that sort of thing. But the whole idea of thinking about why economics should have humans factored in as well might be the reason why, although shoddiness or corruption in the workplace might have been tolerated a little bit earlier in the blessings, by this point it's no longer acceptable in one's pathway of spiritual cultivation. And although I won't go into too much detail today about what is meant by Buddhist economics, there is a whole book about it written by our teacher in Thailand, the Venerable Bodhisattva. He put it together back in the year 2010. And contemporary Western economics tends to try to measure social well-being in terms of financial transactions alone. And the problem with this is that it's a little bit different from Buddhism because it tends to be rather amoral in the way it considers work. For example, a lot of volunteer work done here in our temple, which isn't paid work, would be considered to be an economic non-event from the point of view of a traditional economist in the West. So that doesn't bode very well for our economic contribution to society. Also, economists in the West tend to put values on everything, so the purchase of a bottle of whiskey and the purchase of a sack of rice to feed hungry refugees, both of which cost about 20 quid, would be considered to be of a similar economic value by a Western economist. So within Buddhism, without going into too much detail, I would say that we have seen this little triangle before about human dignity. And up to this point, we've talked about our human environment and the 6 directions, the 6 social groups that we try to gain good habits from in order to cultivate our own sense of human dignity, working on our own human dignity by, for example, keeping the precepts. Last time we looked at how we could reach out to society in the pure practice, Blessing 16, on how we can remain free from bias and prejudice in our dealings with others. That was down on the lower left-hand corner there, human dignity on the social level. But what we come to today is right over on the other side, the right-hand corner of the triangle, which is how we can consider human dignity on the level of the whole economy of the society we live in. So, for example, we might be thinking about what sort of jobs are demeaning for people to do. You get the salary just the same, but it demeans you as a person. Down in that corner, we'd say that this is a point where we have to sit up and take notice in our own spiritual cultivation. So the econ corner back there. The Buddhist work equation says that public health, for example, suffers because of unethical business practices, and that commerce cannot just shrug off, let's say, the medical costs of the way it does business. For example, polluting the environment which all the neighbors have to live in, and then they get health problems, for example. So if consumerism exacerbates crimes, then Buddhism would raise the question why honest taxpayers need to meet the cost of the penal system. In terms of spiritual health, Buddhism would point out that overconsumption and overproduction ravage our mental health, and also stokes the ultimate value of material greed. Also in terms of craftsmanship, Buddhism would say that if people are forced to do shoddy work, then it will lead to shoddy quality of mind. So if workers are enthusiastic to give their best, then apart from job satisfaction, then that would be a much better economy from the point of view of Buddhists. Job satisfaction shouldn't just be about idealism, but where workers actually enjoy the work they do, then they will be willing to go the extra mile in terms of productivity as well. So that would be the sort of the Buddhist perspective on it. And it all respects people's human dignity. However, mostly what we base our decisions on is what attracts the least criticism. If we don't have very clear ideas or principles behind the decision-making, or to measure the standard of the work we do, or the economics behind the work we do, then we tend to rely very heavily on what other people advise us. And Sometimes we don't know whether they are qualified to give the advice or not. And everyone has an opinion, because it's a free country, yes. And in this respect, there is a fun Aesop fable, which is sometimes known as the miller, the son, and his donkey. In other places, it goes by the name of the compliant farmer. And the story goes something like this. One day, a long time ago, there was an old miller and his son, and they were on the way to market with a donkey, which they hoped to sell. And they drove him along the road very slowly, because they thought they would get a better price if the donkey didn't look too exhausted by the time it arrived at the marketplace, and keep him in good condition. So as they walked along the highway, some travelers at the side of the roads laughed at them. And they said, "What foolishness to walk along the road with a donkey when they may as well ride it." And the most stupid of the three, it might not be the one you expect. So the miller had a little meeting with his son, and he didn't like to be laughed at. And they decided that one of them would climb on the back of the donkey, so that they would attract less criticism. So they decided that the boy should get to climb on the donkey. And a little bit further along the road, they met up with another bunch of people at the wayside who had lots of opinions too. And those people shouted out, "Oh, what do we have here? Respect old age, young man. Get down and let the old man ride." And though the miller himself wasn't actually that old or even that tired, grudgingly he made the boy get down and climbed up onto the back of the donkey instead, just to please the people who were voicing their criticism. And at the next turnstile, they overtook some women who were carrying market baskets loaded with vegetables and other things to sell. And they all called out, "Look at the old fool, perched on the donkey while the poor boy has to walk." And the miller felt a little bit vexed by this, but he agreeably told the boy to climb up behind him on the donkey. There are now two of them on the donkey. And no sooner had they started out than a loud shout went up from another crowd of people on the road. "What a crime," they said, "to overload a poor dumb beast like that. They look more able to carry the poor creature than he is to carry them. If they're on their way to sell that animal, then they must be on their way to sell it to the knacker's yard." So the miller and the son soon scrambled down from the back of the donkey, and a short time later, the whole marketplace was thrown in uproar when the two came on the scene carrying the donkey slung from a pole. And the great crowd of people ran out to get a closer look at the strange sight, and the donkey didn't mind being carried. But when so many people came to laugh and shout and point at him, then he started to kick and to bray, and just as they were crossing a bridge, the ropes that held him in place on his pole actually snapped, and down fell the donkey into the river below. End of. So at this point, there was nothing left for the poor miller to do but to set out sadly for home. And usually the moral given for this fable is that when you try to please everyone, you can end up pleasing no one. But maybe a more poignant message to take from the story, especially in the context of ethical work, is that if you want to find something to criticize, you can always find something. However, unfortunately for those who spend their whole time criticizing others, and if you are sort of something like a film critic or something, they are rather numerous in the world. Therefore, if you're going to rely on other people's criticism to teach you the truth of a situation, then you will always be at a disadvantage. So this is why you're better advised to work from some sort of rule of thumb rather than popular opinion, or at least principles that are tried and tested. And in the place of hearsay or arbitrary standards in the workplace, the Buddha advocated that we should make sure that any work we do is ethical as far as possible, and to draw the line accordingly. And in this respect, we saw back in blessing number 9 4 principles for judging any decisions we make. And the first and most important criterion for livelihood being ethical is that it should not compromise the 5 precepts, which you all know already, right? Yes? Ring a bell? Not killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, telling lies, or mixed with intoxicants of various sorts. Or what you can, in other words, consider to be a sort of minimum baseline of humane behavior. For example, getting a job as a hired assassin would be bad because it involves like killing people and being paid for it, yes. Even if unless you are unsuccessful at it, yes. A second criteria is that of not compromising what are known as 5 virtues, which are sort of the flip side of the 5 precepts, which means rather than avoiding doing something, but you do the opposite instead. So anything that conforms with the opposite of breaking the 5 precepts should be a good job to do. So anything that encourages compassion, non-exploitation, not cheating on your lawfully wedded, truthfulness and awareness has the makings of a good job. Yeah? Third criteria is that it should not be illegal. So like smuggling has got a lot of profit in it apparently, but it's illegal, therefore generally doesn't do much for your reputation. And the fourth thing is it should not, if it hasn't fallen foul of any of the first 3, then it should also not conflict with local etiquette. Given that local etiquette may change from place to place depending on the laws of the country or the customs of the country, even if it conforms to the first 3, okay, it should still conform with the final one in order not to bring you into disrepute with the people who you have to get along with in your society. So an example of that is, let's say, giving tips. Giving a tip, not like a piece of advice or like money tip. Apparently Americans like to do this. But if you go to Japan, if you give tips to people, it comes off as very patronizing and embarrassing to the recipient. So not to be done. So you have to have some sort of local awareness to the sort of things you do for your living. So if you want to be a pillar of society and give potential jobs consideration before adopting them professionally, apart from doing your job well, you have to think of any bad side effects that might occur as a result of getting the paycheck that you take home. So checking that your job complies with precepts, the virtues, the law, local etiquette is a good place to start. As for wrong livelihood, ideally our income should come from hard and honest work. Of course, earning your living by thieving or shoplifting or pickpocketing would not be condoned in Buddhism, because they fall the wrong side of the ethical line we defined earlier. And to give clarity in charting what's meant by right and wrong livelihood, you mustn't forget that those who make success out of right livelihood in business also will bring wider benefits to society as well. So it's not just down to the particular person doing the job. So traditionally speaking, there are, and I'll start with traders first of all, so people who sell things. You can imagine sort of a retail shop of some sort. Although there are different aspects to right livelihood, and I'll go into some or more of them next week perhaps. For example, in commerce, public sector, military, medical profession, and even some customers themselves are quite tricky sometimes. I'll start with the retail or commerce. And there's a particular teaching in the Buddhist scriptures known as the Vānicca Sutta. It's the Anguttara Nikaya, which advocates that Buddhists should avoid 5 specific types of retail weapons, flesh, slaves, alcohol, or poisons. So, selling weapons refer to anything that can kill animals or people, and supporting ourselves from the profit made out of that. Problem with being an arms salesman or a gun runner is that it makes you see the world in a strange way. Like you feel like sad if they ever declare peace in the world. Business is good when they're all shooting each other, yay! So you start to see the world in rather a strange and callous way. And actually you end up seeing your fellow human beings as more like target practice. Yes. Second sort of one, slave trade, there. Human trafficking more generally means buying people at a low price and selling them at a higher price, and supporting oneself from the profit made. It might include sex work, or taking any sort of profit out of another person's sense of human dignity. And you can imagine the sort of people who get mixed up in that sort of trade. To quote Bob Dylan, he started in the dealing with slaves and something inside of him died. And what has to die for a slave trader to continue to do their job is any respect for human dignity for their merchandise. Third one, dealing in flesh, which means rearing live animals like, let's say, cows, pigs, ducks, chickens, to slaughter oneself or have someone else slaughter for you. So even if you don't slaughter them yourself, if you're selling them on to the slaughterhouse, it still comes back as karma to you. So most normal people look on animals with sort of compassion, like nice fluffy, furry ones. But meat trade causes you to see animals as nothing more than a walking meat counter. So although it might not be your hand on the sort of captive bolt pistol, as a meat trader, your appreciation of preciousness of life will sort of disappear. Fourth one, dealing in alcohol or narcotics. Selling alcohol, which might be beer, spirits, or any other sort of non-medicinal narcotic, causing heedlessness. Supporting oneself from the profit. So your humble off-license might look sort of handy place, have in the corner, open late at night, but the fact it sells liquor, even though it complies with the law of most countries, does break with right livelihood. Because if you imagine who are your best customers, not the people who come in once a year, those who are addicts, basically. Yeah. Addicts, you got sure customers. So basically you're making a profit out of at their expense. So your whole reputation, wealth and health, ironically you have to have a certificate of good character in order to open a bar in America. Yeah, I'm not sure whether the good character continues after you have managed to open it or not. Final one, yes, dealing in poisons. So it might mean things like insecticide, rat poison, or even the sort that you slip in people's drinks. And even things like DDT, which used to be used as ways to solve the malaria problem, actually take 15 or 20 years to break down. So it leads people in mosquito-ridden areas to die of DDT poisoning long before they die of malaria in many cases. So, in summary, those entangled in any of these trades will find it more and more difficult to feel compassion for other people. And the same principles of right livelihood would apply also to things like the public sector. Generally, you're not selling things anymore, but let's say you're working in a place where you have some influence on a public level, then it's mostly the thing you have to watch out for is corruption or corrupt practices. So things like looking the other way in terms of things like soft drugs, casinos, forgery, sex trade, white-collar crime, or allowing payments to influence the outcomes where you're supposed to be objective, like let's say measuring the size of someone's land. If they pay you, then you can over or under measure it to whoever's advantage it is who paid you. Judges being open to bribery. Yeah, probably enough said. And also, while I'm at it, sometimes life in the military sounds like sort of something quite heroic, fighting for king and country, that sort of thing. And most religions find themselves in a position where they have to sort of come out and say patriotic things. Unfortunately, the Buddha didn't toe the line. And he explained in a teaching in the Samyutta Nikaya called the Gammawattu Sutta that those who kill will be killed in return. And even for those who only consider killing others, they will end up in what are euphemistically called the unfortunate realms. Doctors and nurses, generally good, right? Well, they may not be good if you don't do your job well. It may cause you the opposite of uplift in your life, making a difference in the world in a bad way instead of a good way. So being a good doctor or nurse, actually you need to work at that quite well. You should be motivated by love, not money, of your patients, not be fazed by gore, able to cheer up the patient with Dhamma teachings as well. And even our humble customer can also be guilty of wrong livelihood, so beware. Even those on the other side of the counter, sometimes they are a little bit untrustworthy. See if you can get your head around this one. Some customers are like really tricky. So a guy goes into a butcher's shop, and the butcher has got 2 deer for sale, okay? A big one and a small one. With me so far? Sorry? Yeah, so venison, okay? It'd probably be easier if it's like pork pies or something, I don't know. But yeah, there's like 2 deer, big one, small one, for sale. And the price is 20 quid for the big one and 10 quid for the small one. With me so far? You haven't been not confused yet? Yeah, the confusion will come. So a devious customer comes up and he says, I want the small one. Here's 10 quid. So, okay, so far so good, okay? Everyone's on an even keel. Sometime later, the customer comes back and he says he's changed his mind. He said he doesn't want the small deer anymore, he wants the big one. So he's going to return the small deer and give an extra... I'm confused myself now. The butcher says, well, that's going to be 20 quid then. And he says, well, actually, I already paid you 10 quid for the small one, and now I'm returning that, so I just should pay you... I don't need to pay you anything extra. Right or wrong? He already had £10, and now he's giving him back the small deer as well. So he's going to ask for the big deer yeah, I think we'll let Wendy be the shopkeeper from now on. He's had £10, he's giving back the small deal, also worth £10, so now that's equal to the big deal, right? Ah, good, we'll let Wendy be the shopkeeper, okay? But some customers try it on like this, in which case they would be guilty of wrong livelihood. Yeah, okay, even just telling you the story, I'm confused. Anyway, to finish off with today, we have a few little announcements, more next time on the right and wrong livelihood. If you enjoyed meditation today, I would encourage you to meditate further, and generally encourage people to meditate for 20 minutes a day at home if they can, using the method they have learned here. If you meditate for 20 minutes a day, then generally it will accumulate in your quality of meditation. You'll be able to go further and faster in your meditation as time goes on. Yeah. If you forget how to meditate, then MindGem is a good source for meditation audio tracks for you to listen to as you are meditating along, and you can even set a timer on that app, which you can download for free, in order to set a time which you want to meditate for. Yes, and there are various teachers who you'll be familiar with also on those audio tracks. There's more than 100 tracks now on there. Here we have meditation every Tuesday and Thursday, as you may have discovered, but during the month of August we are taking a break until September because we have so many residential activities going on that we probably won't get any peace and quiet if you try and meditate here. But if you really insist on coming, probably there will still be evening chanting to come to at 6 o'clock if you really want to join in with some meditation here during that month of August. On Saturdays online, there's also a Zoom meditation that goes on European-wide between 7 and 8. And you should write down the Zoom details there and tune into that. Our next meditation retreat coming up, which will probably be here, will be between the 16th and 18th of September. So that's Friday night, Saturday, and then Sunday finishing in the afternoon, for those who'd like to take the meditation a little bit further. The residential things I've been talking about are for young boys, an annual Buddhist novice ordination training scheme between 30th of July and 14th of August for boys aged between 10 and 19. We have 6 signed up so far, but we're hoping to get to 10 if we can. For the ladies, between the 26th to the 28th of August, so it's a weekend, we have combined the ladies' retreat with a young ladies' retreat, but we will have separate rooms for them. For the youngsters, then we probably will have more sort of fun activities mixed up with meditation, not long boring sermons and long boring meditations, but some sort of fun in between as well. Yes. As for grown-ups, then less fun, more meditation. Coming up soon, on the 13th of August, we have a food bank almsgiving in the Jubilee Square of Woking, just in front of Peacock Shopping Centre. Something we haven't done for a couple of years, but the mayor and council are backing us on that. All the food given to the monks for the almsgiving will then be passed on to the food bank for the benefit of the poor and needy in Woking. And our temple open day will be the very next day on the 14th of August between 2:15 and 4 p.m. It's a chance for people who are normally too scared to come and look around the temple to come and find out more about our temple history, temple layout, and there'll be some activities especially for children and meditation. And it's, although our publicity probably hasn't gone that far this year, but it is a good opportunity if you have family members who want to know more about where you've disappeared off to every Tuesday and Thursday evening for them to find out and overcome their curiosity on that particular one. Yes, indeed. So that's all I have to say for today. But if there are any questions, comments, or feedback at this point, I'd be very happy to hear from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have any questions right now, you're very welcome
of you be blessed with happiness, success, and prosperity in life, and be able to find right livelihood in your working lives easily now and forevermore.